So, hello everyone, welcome back to Python for Economics course. So, in previous lesson, we created our first program and used print function and perform a simple GDP per capita calculation. So, in this session, we will study two most important foundations of Python, that is variable and data type. Okay. So, variable basically allows us to store a lot of economic information such as country, year, GDP, population, inflation, unemployment, and policy status. Whereas data type tells us Python like what kind of information we are going to store. Okay. So for example, a country name in text, a year is normally in a whole number, and let's say an inflation rate may contain a decimal point, and the recent indicator may be either true or false. So by end of this session, you should be able to create a meaningful economic variable, select a suitable data type, convert the value from one type to another, and also identify the common beginner errors as well. So see, all economic values used in notebooks are completely illustrative, so they should not be treated as an official or a current economic statistics. Okay, so I would recommend you to keep your Google Colab notebook open and type code along with me. So let's start. So if you see at top, we have mentioned our main course title, that is Python for Economics, and the lesson title is like a variable and data types for economic. So for course level is like completely for beginner. So economic application we have mentioned in the notebook include country, state, time, period, then the GDP, population, inflation, then the unemployment, growth rate, policy status, and recession indicators. So this is important because we are not learning Python through discrete example. Every concept will be connected with information that economic students should regularly encounter. Okay, so if you look at how to use this notebook, so to obtain best result from this lesson, you should follow certain steps like read the explanation before running the code. Secondly, you should type the important example yourself instead of only copying them. Third, run every code cell. Fourth, try to change some values and observe the output changes. Fifth, deliberately test the selected errors also. See, again, errors are part of learning programming, so we'll examine the error message, what it means, and how to correct it. Sixth, we will try to complete the practice exercise before opening the solution notebook. Okay, and finally, explain the results economically. So this course is not only about producing the code, it is also about understanding the meaning and limitation of the output. Okay, so if we talk about the learning outcome, so by end of the notebook you should be able to explain what the variable means. You should be able to like create and update the variable. You should follow certain naming rules. You should be able to distinguish between integer, float, string, and boolean data. You should be able to check the variable type using a type function. You should be able to convert the values using the int function, float function, string function. You should be able to recognize the common error that are there. You should be able to read the statement using a f string, and you should build a simple country economic profile as well. Okay, so with this, let's start with the first instance, that is understanding of variable. See, a variable is a, what we can say, it's a name that is used to store a specific value. Okay, see, what happens is economists use this variables or these names regularly to work with some kind of named information. Okay, for example, what it can be, like a name of a country, particular year, total GDP, then population, inflation, unemployment, or an economic growth rate as well. Okay, so instead of repeatedly typing the complete value, we store the value in the clearly named variable. So let us now first execute the example. So here what we are doing is we are taking a variable as country. If you India, okay, in which we are storing those India as a name in double quotes. Then we have took the another variable, that is year, in which we have stored 2026, Then we have took another variable GDP underscore growth, in which we have stored a floating point value, that is 6.5. Okay, so, and lastly what we are doing is we are trying to print the country. Okay, using a print function, we are printing the country, we are printing the year, and we are printing the GDP. So let's try to understand the complete code line by line. See, the first code says what? Country equals to India. Okay, see, the word country over here is what? It's a variable. Okay, equal to sign is what? It's a assignment operator, and the text India is the value that is stored inside that particular name. So with this we can read the statement as what? Store the text India in the variable named country. Okay, I hope you got this. The quotation mark are necessary because the India is a text. The next line is year equals to 2026. See, year is a variable name. The value is what? 2026. So because the year is stored in a whole number, quotation marks are not required at this particular instance. Okay, because okay, I hope you got this. And third is GDP underscore growth equal to 6.5. So here this is the what we are storing the decimal value 6.5 in the variable name GDP underscore growth. Okay, so see, notice that the variable name contains an underscore. Okay, so variable names cannot normally contain spaces. Therefore, instead of writing GDP space growth, what we have done is we have written GDP underscore growth. Okay, now for this variable what we are doing is we are using a print function. Okay, so if we just look at the first line, okay, it says what? Print country. Now the variable name is not placed inside a quotation mark. Okay, so Python therefore displays the value stored inside the variable. So, okay, similarly if you see print year and print GDP underscore growth, let me just execute the cell for you. You will see the output. It is like India 2026 and 6.5. I hope you got this. Okay, so if you talk about the assignment operator, see, in Python equal sign is used for assignment. What happens is it stores the value on right side of the variable, that of for the left side. Okay, so do not read it as mathematical equality. Okay, so when we say country equals to India, it means what? Python first evaluate the value on the right hand side and then assign it to the name on the left hand side. Okay, so this assignment concept will be used throughout the Python programming. Please keep this in mind. Okay, so with this, like, we'll try to understand like why variables are useful. See, variable help us in several different ways. They allow us to update value in one place. They allow us to reuse the values in calculation. They reduce the repeated typing. They make programming easier to read. They also make the research notebook easier to maintain. Okay, so let's take a small example for it. Let's take an example for country equals to Brazil, inflation rate equals to 4.2. See, and what we are doing is we are writing print function and using f string over here. I will return the illustrative rate for the curly bracket country, curly bracket closing is curly bracket opening, inflation rate, curly bracket closing, percentage, full stop, and double quote. See, the first variable stores what? It stores the country name. Okay, secondly, if you look at the second variable, it is nothing but what? It stores the illustrative inflation rate. The final line uses both variable and also what? In the readable statement, and the values are stored once but can be used in multiple times. So let me just execute this code for you. See, okay, so the output is what? It is illustrative inflation rate for the Brazil is 4.2%. Okay, so now with this, let's look at the next example, updating a variable. See, a variable is a assigned new value. So basically what is happening, Python uses most recent stored value in the variable. Okay, for example, what? Inflation equals to 4.2. Okay, what we are doing is we are using a print function. Okay, and we are calling a banner inflation value colon, and again we are producing the double quotes comma, we are calling the variable name. Okay, second case also we are doing the same thing. We are taking a variable inflation underscore rate is equal to 4.6. Okay, and in print we are writing updated value comma inflation rate. So let us examine the sequence first see the inflation underscore rate stores what 4.2 value. Python prints this initial value. Okay, after that the same value is assigned inside a new value with what 4.6. So what is happening, the original value is getting replaced. So when Python prints the variable again, it displays what the 4.6 as its result. Okay, so let me just execute the code for you. So yes, what we can say is we can check that the initial value is 4.2 and the updated value is what 4.6. See, in an economic context, an update may represent a revised estimate, created entry, a new observation, or a new reporting period also. Okay, so in research, however, we should not document why a value was changed. I hope you are getting this. Okay, let's look at the next point, creating a variable from another variable. See, a variable may be used to create a new variable. So consider GDP per capita calculation, that is what total underscore GDP. So we have mentioned as what 3 underscore 500 underscore 000 underscore 000 underscore 000. Then we have to a population variable in which we are storing what 1 underscore 430 underscore 000 underscore 000. Then we have to another new variable in which we are saying total underscore GDP divided by the population. Okay, and then we are printing using f string that illustrative GDP per capita will be this is this value. Okay, now see, the first variable stores what it stores an illustrative total GDP value at this particular point. Okay, so what is happening, the second with this second variable is storing what, it's storing population. The underscore inside the larger number are used only to improve the readability. I hope you are getting this. With this, the what we are doing is Python treats this underscore value, that is I remember 3 underscore 500 underscore 3 000 underscore 000 underscore 000. It is will be same as what 3 5 and the running zeros. Okay. Now if you look at the next example, that is GDP underscore per capita equals to total underscore GDP divided by population. So what is happening? The Python takes the value stored in total GDP, divides it by the value stored in the population, and store the result in a new variable. That is what GDP underscore per underscore capita. So the forward slash is what? The forward slash over here means what? It's a division operator. Okay. And the final line displays the result in what terms? It displays the result in terms of what? GDP underscore per underscore capita colon, then the dot 2f means what? It Python, it tells the Python to display 2 digits after the decimal point. Okay, so let me just execute the cell for you. Okay, so it is mentioning what? The illustrative GDP per capita is what? 2447.55. Okay, so the important lesson is that a new economic variable can be considered from the existing variable completely. Okay, so let's look at the next point now, the variable naming rules. See, when we say variable naming rule, a good variable name should always be valid in Python. It should be meaningful, it should be readable, it should be consistent and relevant to economic concept. See, variable name should be help the reader to understand like what information is getting stored. Okay, so let's look at this. If you see, these are the certain variable naming scenarios we can say. At first we are talking about the country, year, just see the structure. Okay, then the GDP is written. Then if we are using 2 different words, we have to make sure that we are using what? The underscore. Okay, then the inflation, the unemployment and population. See, let me tell you, Python commonly uses the naming style called as snake case. Okay, so in snake case what is happening? A letter are normally lowercase, and if there are multiple words are separated by using what? Using a underscore. Got this? So these names are clear and descriptive. Now let me just execute this cell for you so that to understand in a better way. So these are the variables. Okay, so like in which I am doing is country underscore name equals to India. Then I have took again a snake case variable GDP underscore growth underscore rate and equals to 6.5. Then again I took unemployment underscore rate equals to 7.2 and I printed. Okay, let me just execute the cell for you. So we'll see that the program displays the country name, GDP growth and the unemployment rate as well. Okay, so now let's look at the next aspect, that is the invalid variable name. See, the notebook contains several invalid examples, so they are commented so that they do not stop the notebook from getting executed. Okay, means what, generally what we do is the user execute complete all this cells in a one single go. Okay, but if it is happening and if I am providing some kind of invalid name, so the interruption will be there. So let's check how the interruption will be seen. So see, at first, what do you think? What is your understanding whether this is a correct or wrong? Let me just uncomment this and let me just execute the cell for you. Sorry for this. So did you see? We are getting an error. What it is saying? It is saying that invalid syntax that is getting mentioned. Okay, means what? See, this is invalid because a variable cannot start with a, what we can say, space. So if you see there is space between a GDP space and growth. Okay, so I'm just uncommenting this again and let's look at the next part. Okay, I'm uncommenting this part and executing the cell. Okay, again it says what, 2026 underscore growth equals to 6.5 and the syntax is what, invalid decimal literal. See, again what it means, a variable name cannot begin with a number. Okay, but yes, if you write growth underscore 2026, it will work completely fine. Okay, secondly, let me just execute this for you. Okay, now can you guess what is the error in this? No one? Okay, see, hyphen is interpreted as a subtraction at this particular instance. Okay, so you, for this to execute this properly, what we can do is we can write underscore at this particular instance and you will find that this code is working completely properly. Okay, the next is, if you see, the next variable says class equal to high income. Let me just uncomment this for you and execute the cell. So here what is happening, it says it is an invalid syntax. Now here everything is completely fine, but what is happening, the word class is reserved in Python keyword. Okay, so Python uses it for a specific programming purpose, so it should not be used as an ordinary variable name. So valid alternative could be what, some xyz like a income underscore class, and then we would have written the variable and then it would have got executed. Okay, so this, in this way it works in a better instances. I hope you got this. Okay, the next part that we are going to do is case sensitivity. See, in Python is very case sensitive. This means that country written in smaller case, country written with C capital, and country written with all letters in a uppercase are three different names we can say. Okay, so you have to execute, if we run this cell. Okay, so what will happen, it will provide us three different examples. How? Let's see. Did you see? Okay, so country with all in a words in a lowercase, variable in lowercase is printing this. Country with C capital is printing what, this is a Brazil. Okay, so the first variable begins with what, lowercase c, and the second begins with the uppercase C. So Python stores them separately and hence we are getting the output as what, India and Brazil as a separate one. Okay, so for research code, use one consistent naming convention and normally you should always follow the lower snake case names as because they are easy to maintain in a complete coding structure. Okay, also avoid overwriting the building names. So when we say building names means what, see, Python already uses certain names for building function and building data types. Okay, so let me just zoom out this for you. I hope this is visible for you now. Yeah, see, you should always like exclude the certain scenarios like print, string, integer, float, list, sum, max and mean as a variable. Okay, so avoid using this name for your own variable. Okay, Why? Let's take an example. uh, let's say I am writing this as a variable. I'm just giving this as a, let me execute this. Okay, now what has happened, this is sum equal to 100 we have written. So if we replace is with what, a sum function. Okay, and so what it will become, it will be like a addition function for a specific variable. Okay, so for this to write, instead of writing this particular instance, what we can do is we can immediately write total underscore income equals to 100, and what we can do is we can try to execute this so that it will not get clashed with the input, that is, I think what, sum as a variable or sum as a complete function. Okay, I hope you got this scenario also. So now these both are safer and also meaningful because we are properly naming certain scenarios that are properly we want to execute at this particular instance. Okay, so if we come to the recommended economic names, see, economic code should use names that are clearly representing the underlying concept. So good example should include what? Real underscore GDP, nominal underscore GDP, consumer underscore price underscore index as a variable name, then the labor underscore force, and per underscore capita underscore income. Okay, so these are the variable that clearly represents the underlying concepts with a good meaning. Okay, also you should avoid naming the variable with like x then a, or like a value 1 or something. So short mathematical names may use sometime or maybe like appropriate in formula, but descriptive names are useful for the better for teaching, for research, and for the collaborative projects also. Okay, so with this, let's move to the next point, that is basic Python data types. See, in Python, basically a data type tells Python like what kind of value is getting stored. So in this notebook, it introduces four basic types of data type. First is integer, float, string, and boolean. Okay, so an integer basically stores a whole number. Okay, a float stores a decimal number, a string stores a text, and a boolean basically stores a either true or false value. So over here, let's start with first, that is integer data type. See, an integer data type, I hope this is visible to you. An integer is a whole number without a decimal point. Okay, so here if you see, year is equal to 2026, number underscore of underscore states equal to 28, sample underscore household equal to 5000. Okay, and what we are doing is we are printing year, printing number underscore of underscore state, and we are printing sample underscore household. So the year, the number of states, and sample size are getting represented with what? As a whole number. Therefore Python is going to store everything as what? In terms of integer. Okay, so integer may be positive, it can be negative, or it can be 0 also. So in economic data set, integer may represents year, number of respondent, number of firms, number of district, or population count also. Okay, so with this, if you go with the move to the next part, that is float data type. See, a float basically represents a number containing a decimal point. Okay, see, a float basically having, like for example, GDP underscore growth is equal to 6.5. Okay, then inflation underscore rate equal to 4.8, then employment underscore rate is equal to like 7.2. So the economic rate frequently contains decimal value, so the float are commonly getting used. Okay, so let me just execute this cell for you. Okay, so do you observe this? Okay, so we are getting the output in terms of what? As a floating point value. See, the float values are basically the frequently containing decimal values, and they are most commonly used. So if you see the difference, that I will execute the previous cell also. So here all values are getting represented with what? As a whole number. Okay, as an integer number, and over here everything is getting in terms of what? As a decimal point or a floating point value. So although the numerical values may appear equivalently in some calculation, Python stores them in different data types. Okay, I hope you got this. So the next example is string data type. See, a string basically represents a text. Okay, so string are normally placed inside quotation mark. So for example, here what we are doing is we are taking a variable, we are mentioning the name inside a double quotation. Simply we have to state as a variable, we have mentioned double quotation. Then we have to third variable, we have mentioned double quotation as a service, and we have to another variable we have mentioned as a double quotation. Okay, see, each value is textual information, and string may contain letter, spaces, number, punctuation, or combination of all of this. Okay, so let me just execute the cell for you, and you will see that the output displays the each text value within. Okay, so with this, say, numbered also getting stored as a string, we can say. So if you look at this, there is a variable here underscore text equals to 2026 and inflation underscore text equal to 4.8. So although this value looks like a number, they are written inside what? The quotation mark. Okay, so what happens? Python therefore stores them as a text value. Okay, so let me just execute the cell for you. Okay, and see, if you see, here I have mentioned inside a print function there is a new type of function, that is a type function, to check what kind of data type the value that was stored inside is double quotation, and you will see that the 2026 value is getting stored in what terms? In terms of what? A string only. So this is important because data imported from a CSV file, form, or website may sometimes look like numeric, but actually they are getting stored as what? In terms of text value. So such value may be required for the type conversion before performing any kind of calculation. Okay, the next type is a Boolean data type. See, over here the Boolean value is either true or false. Okay, so the first letter must be capitalized. Okay, means what? For example, if you see this, here I've written research as a keyword equals to false, policy underscore implemented equals to true, and with T capital. And if you see the high inflation warning variable, I mentioned this as a false with F capital. So a Boolean variable can represent yes or no condition. Okay, so example, it can include like, was a policy implemented, is the economy classified as being in a recession or not, then is observation missing or not, has the inflation exceeded the threshold or not. So do not place quotation mark directly for this Boolean value, otherwise it will be considered as what? It will get converted as what? The string. If you just see, the color is also getting changed at this particular instance. Okay, so never put the quotation marks for the Boolean command. Okay, so with this, let's move to the next point, that is checking the type with the type function. Just like we have performed for the string at this particular instance, we will now discuss what this type function exactly means. See, we can check the variable data type using a type function. Okay, so over here what is happening? Whenever we say a variable equals to India in a double quotes, or a year equals to 2026, or inflation underscore rate equal to 4.8, and recession equal to false. So with this, what is happening? If you see, I have written print. The print is a function. Okay, inside that I have mentioned one more function, that is a type function. Okay, now in this type function I have passed the variable name, okay, which was country equals to India. So what is going to happen is going to check what kind of data type is there in this particular instance. Okay, so let's try to understand it line by line properly. See, once I write type country, so ultimately Python, it asks Python to identify like type of value that is stored inside the variable country. Okay, and the outer print function over here, it is what? It asks the function to display the result. Okay, now let me just execute the cell for you, and you will see class string, class integer, class float, and class boolean. Now going back to this, see, in country we had passed string data type. Okay, and after checking the type of this function, we have understood it is a string. After passing 2026 to this year, we have checked the type of function. It mentions that what? As an integer. Similarly, for this inflation rate, it is 4.8 mentioned as what? Float. and for the recession equal to false, if you see if it is mentioning as what, boolean. So for this beginner course, focus on the type function like string, integer, float and boolean. Okay, so just let's move to the next point now, that is type summary. See, notebook also displays each value with its type function. Okay, so it can be like a multiple scenarios, multiple checks. So if you look at this, country equal to Brazil, then year equal to 2026, GDP growth equal to 3.1 and policy activity equal to true. So what I am doing is I am going to print using the print function. Okay, I am going to store this value inside inside with what, a vertical variable. Okay, that is known as a Python operator. So the vertical bar is used only to display to make the output easy to read. Okay, so it does not have a special role inside a cell string. Okay, so now let me just execute the cell for you and let's see the output. So if you see, the format is basically help us to verify both the value and its data type. Okay, so using the type conversion, what is going to happen, we are going to identify the values both for value and the data type. Okay, so let's move to the next one, that is type conversion. See, type conversion basically changes a value from one data type to another. So the main conversion functions are integer, float, string and boolean. Okay, so see, the type conversion is commonly used when data is getting imported and is entered by a user. Okay, so for example, let's say text to integer. So here what is going to happen, we are taking a variable year underscore text equals to 2026, then there is another variable year underscore number equals to int, and in that we are mentioning year underscore text. Okay, so what is happening, initially 2026 is a string because it is inside what, it's inside a double quotation. Okay, the function in the next line, if you see, the function says int, and inside that int function we have mentioned year underscore text. Okay, so what is going to happen, it converts a text into a integer form, and the converted result is getting stored in what terms, inside this variable, that is year underscore scenarios. Okay, so if you run the code and you have to compare the values, if you see this, it says what, 2026 is a class and it's a string, and 2026 is a class and it's mentioning as what, integer. So the value may look similar, but the type has been changed from string to an integer. Okay, similarly if you look at the text to float also, so in the first variable inflation underscore text equal to 4.8, this is what, it's a string. Okay, inflation underscore number equals to float, it's a what, it's a, in this we are passing what, the floating value is variable. Okay, so the float function basically converts it into what, inside a decimal number, and the converted value can now be used for the arithmetic functioning also. So for example, adjustment, if you see over here, let me execute the cell for you. So it mentions what, string, and this is what, it's a float. Okay, similarly if you look at this, adjustment equal to 4.5, it's what, it's a floating point value, and the revised inflation variable, what we are doing is inflation underscore number plus adjustment. Now see, inflation underscore number, it was what, it was a text that got converted into floating point value, and we already have some kind of floating value. So ultimately what is going to happen here, we are going to get printed the 5.3 as what, a floating point value. Okay, so this result is like a illustrative for the revised inflation rate to be considered. Okay, again there is a next example, that is name to a string, number to a string. So at first variable we are doing what, year equal to 2026, and year underscore as underscore text equal to string, and in this we are passing what, the year as what, as a integer kind of data type. So what we are doing is we are going to convert the integer number into the string data type. So if you look at this, the integer function removes the decimal portion completely, and it is going to store what, it is going to store everything in terms of the string kind of scenarios. Okay, so this may be useful when preparing the labels or combining the values into some kind of textual output. Okay, however, the F string is usually make formatted output look easier also. Secondly, if you look at the floating to integer, say this int basically removes the decimal point and it does not round, and usually this is a mathematical sense also. Okay, see at this what is happening, if you look, I'll just execute this code directly. So it is doing what, your inflation is 4.8, that is a floating point, and your another variable is, we are converting it to using integer function, we are converting it into what, integer type. So what we are doing is, we are at the end, it is going to return as what, 4. So it will not return as something like a upper ceiling value that is 5 or something. Okay, so use the caution when converting the economic rate, because the information might be lost completely. Okay, so with this, the next is like a Boolean conversion. See, Boolean conversion basically can be confusing for the beginner. Okay, why? See, let me just directly execute the cell for you. Okay, so see now, first it writes a print function. Inside a print function, it mentioned as a Boolean function, and we have passed 0. Okay, so ultimately, what is it demonstrating as something as false. Okay, so here what is happening, the 0 is getting mentioned as what, false. A non-zero number, whether it's a 1 or any other, it's going to get it is considered as a true. Okay, plus whenever it is an empty string, it is going to get considered as what, it's going to get considered as false. But if you have something inside that empty string, it is going to get considered as what, true statement. Okay, so Python is a not interpreting the meaning of word, it only checks whether the string contains something. So for beginner work, create the Boolean variable directly. Okay, like decision equal to false, or policy underscore implemented equals to true, so that it becomes easy for us as a beginner. Okay, let's look at the common errors that we are going to get. See, errors are not simply failures. An error message basically provides information about what Python could not execute. Okay, so when an error occurs, you have to read the error type, identify the affected line, examine the value and the name, and correct the cause, and you have to run the cell again. Okay, so let's take a first example, name error. See, let me just remove this comments. Okay, and or let me also remove this part. Okay, so if you see, now what is, if I execute this, okay, it says what, it is a invalid syntax. Okay, now let me just keep this commented. Yeah, so if you see over here, it says what, variable was created with the lowercase but attempted with what, the second case scenario. Are you able to see this? Okay, now what happened, let me just change, because it has previously connected some variables. Let me just write cc country, and over here let me just write cc country. Okay, so let me execute. Are you getting this? Are you able to understand? It's getting a name error. Why? Because variable was created with a lowercase country, but we attempted to print in what, in a different uppercase. So because Python is a case sensitive, it cannot find the requested variable. So what can be the correct scenario? Whatever we are mentioning in the variable name, the same variable should be called at a illustrative example of calling the printing function. So it will get executed in a proper function. Okay. Next is a type error. See, in type error, what is happening? We have 3 variables. Let me just execute them. Remove the comments. Okay. And let me just execute this and just show the error first. It mentions as what? It is mentioning as a type error. See, Python can directly divide text by a number. Okay, can you divide your name with a specific number? No, it's not possible. Okay, so whenever you are not able to divide a text by a number, this will produce error known as what? Type error. So what kind of correction we have to do is, we have to convert this particular like a string into some kind of like a float function. Okay, so creating a float function, what we can do is, we can write this particular over here, and we are going to execute. Okay, now what has happened, it has executed completely in a proper sense. But if you see, we are not getting output. Why we are not getting? Because we have not mentioned the printing of function, like what we are going to print. So let me just write GDP per capita and execute it again. So if you see, I am getting the value as what? 2.5 over here. The next kind of error is what? The value error. Okay, so in value error is what? It's when we are going to process it. Let me just execute this cell. Did you get? Okay, so value error. So what is happening? The float function cannot convert the words like a 4.8 into a numerical float value, and ultimately what is happening? This is producing some kind of error known as a value error. Okay, so what can be the correction for this? It should be like 4.8, that is written over here in this particular instance. Then what we can do is we can convert this particular string into what? Into a real float point value, and then we can perform the printing, and then we can perform the execution. Now we will see it is providing us what? The 4.8 as a complete value. Okay, then there is something known as a concatenation. So see what happens. Just look at this particular code. At first we have a variable value underscore a equals to 10, then value underscore b equals to 5. So we are printing value a plus value b. So ultimately the output is going to be what? It is going to be 105. So Python has started at 10 and 5. What has happened? It is performing joining operation. Okay, this is known as what? String concatenation. So to perform this numerical addition, you have to convert the values value underscore a equals to int. Okay, so for this, if you see this code, what we are doing is value underscore a equal to int, and what we are doing is we are taking another variable value underscore b. Okay, and what we are doing is we are processing as a int 5, and ultimately if we just execute this or print a plus value of b, it says what? The value is 15. Okay, so this is how the concatenation and addition plays two different roles. Okay, so if we talk about the readable economic output, see, fstring allows us to combine the text and the variable. We have mentioned this previously, so just go through this, just read this particular instance. Okay, so you will find that the output statement, let me just execute this. You see that the output statement that is written begins with what? The f letter. Okay, so variable is placed inside the curly bracket over here at all the instances. Okay, and Python replaces it value that is stored inside a particular variable. Okay, and the result is quite readable in economic terms, in economic summary, rather than what? Isolated number. Okay, so this is all for today. Thank you.